A widowed father saw his employee breastfeeding his son in the early morning. He approached her and did this. He didn't speak, not at first. The hallway was dimly lit, only the golden streaks of dawn slipping past the drawn curtains and spilling onto the marbled floor. His feet had stilled on the threshold, caught between disbelief and something far more complex. An emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time, tenderness. Isabella didn't notice him at first. Her soft humming filled the silence, low and instinctive, as though it was sewn into her bones. Her head was tilted slightly to the left, auburn curls tumbling over her shoulder, and her eyes gazed downward at the baby cradled in her arms, his baby. Aiden, barely 6 months old, was suckling gently, his tiny fingers gripping her blouse in that innocent, trusting way that only infants can. Something flickered behind Thomas Hale's eyes. Confusion, perhaps. Gratitude. Or guilt. He'd hired Isabella 2 months ago as a live-in housekeeper and part-time nanny. No resume, no polished credentials, just quiet confidence and an honesty in her eyes that reminded him painfully of his late wife, Amelia. He hadn't questioned her motives, and she hadn't offered any explanations. She was kind. The children adored her. And that had been enough. Until now. Thomas finally stepped into the room, and the old wooden floor groaned beneath his weight. Isabella looked up with a start, her breath catching. But there was no shame in her eyes, only calmness, as if she'd expected him all along. I thought he was crying, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The bottle wasn't warming fast enough. I didn't want to wake you. Thomas nodded slowly, trying to find the right words. He should have been angry, or disturbed, or even afraid. But he wasn't. Instead, he sat down gently across from her on the velvet settee and folded his hands in his lap. I should have told you earlier, Isabella said after a beat. My daughter passed away 2 years ago. She was only a few weeks old. I couldn't bring myself to stop lactating. Maybe I didn't want to forget what it felt like, to be needed like that, to give life. Silence settled between them, thick with unspoken emotion. Thomas didn't interrupt. He simply listened, truly listened, in a way he hadn't done in years. I wasn't trying to overstep, she continued, her gaze falling back to the baby. But he wouldn't stop crying, and I just held him. He calmed the moment he felt skin warmth. And I thought, just for a moment, I could help. Even if it was just this once. Thomas stood and walked slowly toward her. He knelt, gently brushing his hand over Aiden's silky hair, and then met Isabella's eyes. You did help, he murmured. More than I know how to say. His voice cracked slightly, and Isabella could feel the ache in it. The kind of ache that comes from losing someone you loved with your whole soul. The kind that builds a wall around your heart and convinces you it will never beat freely again. I haven't seen him that peaceful since Amelia died, Thomas confessed. You gave him something I didn't even realize he was missing. I wasn't trying to replace her, Isabella whispered. I know. You didn't. But maybe it's okay that someone is finally here. Someone who doesn't disappear when it gets too hard. There was a moment then, suspended in fragile understanding. Thomas leaned closer, his fingers curling gently over Isabella's, the gesture innocent but intimate. He didn't let go. Isabella looked away, her throat tightening. You don't have to pretend I'm someone I'm not. I know what people would say about this. About me. I don't care what people would say, Thomas said. I care that my son smiled for the first time in days. I care that my daughter runs to you when she's scared. I care that the silence in this house is slowly being replaced by warmth. You did that, Isabella. You. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. I've never felt needed like this before. Not since. Then maybe we both needed saving, Thomas said gently. The morning light shifted, and the room warmed with the golden glow of a new day. Aiden's breathing slowed, his tiny body curled closer to Isabella's chest. Thomas didn't move. He watched them both, his heart, once sealed tight by grief, now showing the first signs of cracks healing. Not erased, but softened. A knock on the doorframe pulled their attention. 4-year-old Lily peeked in, her sleepy eyes blinking up at them. Is Bella making breakfast? She asked, her voice heavy with the lisp of mourning. Isabella smiled through her tears. Of course, sweetheart. Come here. Lily climbed onto the couch beside her, laying her head on Isabella's thigh. Thomas watched the scene, his children gravitating toward this woman like sunflowers to the sun, and something unspoken solidified inside him. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Isabella wasn't just helping. She was becoming something else entirely. Something deeper. Something dangerously close to irreplaceable. Later that afternoon, after the children had napped and the house was wrapped in a hush of calm, Thomas found himself lingering outside the kitchen. He watched Isabella stir a pot of soup, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, her expression focused and peaceful. The air smelled like rosemary and fresh bread. Like home. He stepped inside. She looked up and smiled, unsure. "I was wondering," Thomas began, then hesitated. "Would you sit with me tonight? After the kids are asleep." Isabella's fingers stilled. "Are you sure?" "I haven't been more certain of anything in a long time," he said. "We don't have to talk about anything big. Just sit. I want to know more about you, beyond the kindness you show my kids. I want to know what makes you smile, what makes you laugh, what you dream about when no one's watching." Her expression softened, curiosity blooming slowly across her features. "You really want to know?" "Yes. I think I already know the important part, that you have more heart than anyone I've met. But the rest, I want to discover for myself." She nodded slowly, the faintest hint of a blush rising to her cheeks. "Then I'll see you tonight." Thomas left the kitchen with a strange lightness in his step. Not joy, he wasn't there yet, but hope. A delicate, pulsing hope that maybe, just maybe, the past didn't have to keep him chained forever. Maybe the pieces of a shattered heart could find their way back together in unexpected hands. That evening, after the children had fallen into deep sleep and the house settled into its usual nighttime hush, Thomas stood outside the guest sitting room. It was a space he rarely used, filled with dusty books, a barely used grand piano, and soft armchairs with age-worn cushions. Isabella was already there, seated on the velvet couch near the bay window, lit only by the low amber glow of a single-floor lamp. She had changed into a loose knitted sweater, her hair falling in waves over her shoulders. A quiet serenity radiated from her as she looked up at him, the ghost of a smile curling her lips. Thomas stepped in, the door clicking softly behind him. "Would you like tea?" he asked, raising the porcelain tray he carried. Isabella's smile widened. "You made tea? Don't sound so surprised. I used to make it all the time. Amelia liked chamomile before bed. I figured you might like it too." He set the tray down on the coffee table, hands moving with a kind of reverence. Isabella reached forward and took the delicate cup he offered, her fingers brushing his, and for a moment, their eyes met and held, neither pulling away. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said softly, her voice low like a secret. "I wasn't sure I'd ask," he replied, sitting down beside her, careful to leave just enough space that didn't feel forced. "But I'm glad I did." The silence between them was comfortable this time. No need to fill it. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, brushing against the windows with a lullaby rustle. The fire in the corner crackled faintly, casting flickering shadows that danced across the room like memories trying to take shape. Thomas looked down into his tea, then back at her. "You know, I used to think love was a one-time thing. That if you were lucky enough to find it, and then lost it, that was it. No second chances." Isabella looked at him, her expression unreadable but deeply attentive. "I was wrong," he continued. "Love doesn't end. It changes shape. It evolves. Sometimes, it sneaks back into your life through the smallest acts. A song, a scent, or the sight of someone holding your son like he's her own." Her breath caught at that, and she looked down into her lap. "I didn't mean to feel so much," she whispered. "I told myself I was just helping. I didn't want to fall into something I couldn't climb out of." "You think this is a trap?" he asked gently. "No," she said. "But it scares me. I've never had anything like this family, this warmth. I thought I'd buried that part of myself with my daughter, that I didn't deserve another chance." Thomas reached out then, his hand covering hers, grounding her. "You do. You deserve more than you've allowed yourself to believe. And not because of what you've done for us, but because of who you are." Isabella looked at him again, and this time, her eyes shimmered not with tears, but with something deeper, an unspoken longing. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because I know what it feels like to be seen as useful, but not cherished. You've given so much, expecting nothing in return. Maybe it's time someone gave a little back." Their hands stayed locked, fingers intertwined now. The space between them shrank until the warmth of his body was close enough to feel. Thomas leaned closer, not to kiss her, not yet, but just to be near. To let her know she wasn't alone anymore. "Tell me about your daughter," he said softly. Isabella's lips parted in surprise, then curled into a wistful smile. "Her name was Mira." She had the darkest eyes, like little stars that hadn't finished forming. She only lived for 29 days. But those days were everything. She loved music. I used to hum lullabies, and she'd turn her head like she was following the sound. She must have been beautiful, Thomas said. She was, Isabella said, her voice cracking slightly. She was everything. And losing her nearly destroyed me. He let the silence hold that weight, honoring it. I didn't know how to let her go, she continued. So I didn't. I kept pumping, kept giving milk to other mothers through donation networks. It made me feel like she hadn't completely disappeared. And then one day it just stopped. The emails, the requests. And I was left with all this milk and no child. Until Aiden cried that night, and something inside me said, "Let me try." She looked at him then, searching his face for judgment. There was none. I didn't do it to be noble. I did it to feel alive again. And you brought him comfort in a way I couldn't. That's not just noble, Isabella. That's extraordinary. She looked away, a tear slipping down her cheek, and this time he reached to wipe it gently with his thumb. You brought life back into this house, he murmured. Into me. A hush followed that confession. A weightless, suspended moment where the air seemed to hum with something unspoken but deeply felt. Thomas leaned his forehead against hers, the gesture soft, his eyes fluttering closed. She didn't pull away. I don't know where this is going, she whispered. I don't know if I'm ready. I'm not asking for promises, he said. Just honesty. Just time. Isabella drew in a shaky breath and nodded slowly. Then take all the time you need. They sat like that for a while, wrapped in the quiet safety of each other's presence. Nothing grand. Nothing defined. But something was building, something real. Eventually, Thomas stood and helped her to her feet. Walk with me? He asked. She followed him barefoot through the long corridor, past the nursery and the silent piano, out onto the rear veranda where the garden slumbered beneath the moonlight. The night was cool, the breeze gentle as it tugged at the hem of her sweater. Stars peppered the sky above, clear and endless. He pointed to one. Amelia used to say every person gets a star of their own, that even when we're gone, we shine somewhere. I like to think she's watching. Not judging. Just watching. She'd be proud of you, Isabella said. I hope so. He turned to her. And if she were here right now, I think she'd tell me not to waste a single second more being afraid. He reached for her hand again, and this time, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers slipped into his like they belonged there. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't have to. Something sacred had been said in the silence, something louder than words, that hearts long shattered could still beat again. That the pain of the past didn't have to be a barrier, it could be a bridge. And as they stood beneath the stars, hands entwined, the wounds they each carried finally began to feel less like scars and more like soil, where something new could quietly begin to grow. The days that followed unfolded like pages of a novel neither of them expected to write, yet couldn't stop reading. The walls of the Hale estate, once so cold and drenched in the shadow of morning, gradually came to life again. Laughter became a daily guest, carried on the voices of children and echoed in the corners of the home. Lily's playful squeals, Aiden's growing babbles, and the quiet, shared smiles between Isabella and Thomas painted a portrait of healing, a delicate symphony of second chances. It wasn't love at first sight, nor was it a fiery, reckless passion. What grew between them was something far rarer, intentional, patient, and deeply human. It was found in the smallest of moments. The way Isabella would pause while folding laundry to press a kiss to Aiden's cheek. The way Thomas would make sure her tea was warm before she even realized it had gone cold. The way their eyes would linger a second too long over dinner, speaking volumes without uttering a word. Yet it wasn't without its storms. One morning, nearly a month after that quiet evening on the veranda, Thomas came across an envelope tucked in the drawer of the front hall table. Isabella's handwriting. His heart clenched as he pulled it open. Inside, a short letter. Thomas, if I'm ever to truly be a part of this story, I need to know that I came by choice, not by accident, not by circumstance. I'm going away for a few days. I need to visit Myra's resting place. I need to say goodbye properly, without guilt, without holding back. I need to be ready to live again, fully, freely, and without a ghost between us. If you still want me when I return, I'll be yours in every way. Isabella. He stared at the note for a long time, the ache in his chest a mix of panic and reverence. She wasn't leaving him. She was facing her pain. And in doing so, she was making room. For him, for his children, for a future that might actually be real. Isabella's absence, brief though it was, felt enormous. Not because the house fell apart without her, it didn't, but because her presence had become as natural and essential as breath. Lily asked about her constantly, drawing hearts on napkins and leaving them on Isabella's pillow. Aiden whimpered more than usual at night, as though sensing the absence of the warmth he'd come to associate with peace. Thomas, too, felt the void. He missed the scent of cinnamon and clove that seemed to follow her. He missed the soft hums she gave while cooking, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the way her eyes searched his like she was reading every line of his soul without fear. But more than that, he missed the feeling of being seen, not as a man who had lost, but as one who still had something to give. She returned on the fourth evening. Not with grand gestures or declarations, but quietly. She slipped through the front door just past twilight, her coat dusted with the scent of late summer rain, her eyes tired but clear. When Thomas saw her standing in the foyer, his breath caught, not from surprise, but from something deeper. Recognition. She had changed somehow. Or perhaps she had simply returned whole. "I'm ready," she said simply. He didn't need to ask for what. He crossed the room, took her face in his hands, and kissed her. Not like a man trying to claim something, but like someone welcoming home a piece of himself he hadn't realized was missing. From that moment, everything shifted. Their bond became the quiet anchor around which their days spun. They didn't rush into titles or promises, but the world around them began to reflect their unspoken truth. Neighbors who had once gossiped about the young nanny now greeted her with fond familiarity. Isabella became a fixture in the community, gentle, graceful, and full of quiet wisdom. Mothers would ask her for advice, not because she pretended to have answers, but because she listened, truly listened. Thomas, too, was transforming. He no longer wore grief like a cloak, but like a badge, proof that he had endured, and that through endurance, he had found something worth cherishing again. He smiled more. He let himself dream again. And often, those dreams involved a table filled with messy plates, sticky fingers, and a woman with amber eyes who made every moment feel like a page from something timeless. One chilly October evening, as the leaves painted the horizon in firelight colors, Thomas took Isabella and the children to the orchard at the edge of town. They sat under a tree whose branches stretched wide like arms waiting to embrace them. Aiden crawled across a quilt of fallen leaves, and Lily braided a crown from wildflowers and weeds. Thomas pulled Isabella aside, just far enough for the children's laughter to become music behind them. "Do you know," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, "I thought I'd never feel again. Not like this. Not with anyone." "I know," she whispered, "but you brought me back. And I don't want to go another day without saying what I mean." Her breath hitched. He reached into his coat pocket and drew out a small, weathered locket. It had belonged to Amelia. Inside was a new photograph, one of Isabella with Lily and Aiden, all three of them laughing in the garden. The other half of the locket held a pressed petal from the first flower Lily had ever given her. Thomas pressed it into Isabella's palm. "It doesn't have to be a ring. Not yet. Just a promise. That this life, this strange, beautiful thing we're building, isn't temporary." Isabella looked down at the locket, tears welling as her fingers closed around it. It never felt temporary. It felt like home. The wind stirred around them, carrying the crisp scent of apples and fallen leaves. Above, the sky stretched out endlessly, starlit and open. The children called out, chasing each other through the orchard as laughter erupted like fireworks. Thomas leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. "I once thought love ended with death," he murmured. "But now I know, it begins again with courage. And you, Isabella, are the bravest person I've ever known." She smiled through tears, whispering, "Then let's be brave together." And so they were. Not because life became perfect, but because they stopped waiting for it to be. They embraced its mess, its miracles, its moments of softness wrapped in chaos. They built a love not defined by tragedy, but reborn through it. In a house once haunted by silence, there now lived music, laughter, and love written in the language of second chances. A father who learned to love again. A woman who found herself in the act of giving. And two children who would never remember a time without the warmth of the woman who saved them all. Not by trying, but simply by being.